Hello, welcome to my channel. I am Puddles, and today we have another video on encounter building. This is number 10, we're in double digits, and we are continuing our talking about reskinning the NPC creatures in the NPC section of the book. And I did one on the magic casters, and now it's time to reskin some fighters or some rogues. So let's just jump right in, shall we? So number 1, we have a deep gnome. So in the monster manual, I think they might be changing this with modern Kainens, but deep gnomes have one creature that you can use from the monster manual. So it makes sense if you want to put a bit of variety in there that you would add some NPC ones. So I have a deep gnome skulker. They are a spy reflaver. The spy is a really good NPC, I find, because rogues have just so much choice in what they want to do because of their cunning action. So having that tool as a DM is very useful, and it makes your combats a lot better, I find. I use spies a lot when I can use it. In terms of the things that I've changed, so we talked about in the other video changing like spells. With fighters, you can change the weapons they have, you can change the armor they're wearing, you can change abilities that they have. You can give them potions, you can give them poison on their weapons. You can do all of these things to change them up, to make them more like the creatures that they're supposed to be. But just when you are doing these things, just remember that certain things might throw your fight out of balance. AC, for instance, if you're giving something more AC, it's going to be a lot harder to kill, especially if it's already got high AC. The difference between 17 AC and 19 AC to hit something is a large margin. So just keep that in mind. And damage output. If you're swapping something that has a short sword with a long, or even like a great sword or something, you're essentially doubling the damage that it can do with one hit. So just keep those things in mind when you're changing them, and you should be okay. But the more you do this sort of stuff, the easier you'll find it, and you sort of get a feel for what is balanced. In terms of this old skulking guy, the story behind them, the deep gnomes have trained some skulkers to come to the surface to steal gems from a local jeweler. So deep gnomes love gems, and jewelry stores have gems in them, so they've trained some of them to be super sneaky. I have changed some things with them though, so let's just have a look at that. So all gnomes have stone camouflage, so they have advantage on intelligence, wisdom, and charisma saving throws against magic. So they're much better at magical saving throws, and they have stone camouflage, which gives them advantage on stealth checks when they're hiding in rocky terrain. That's just a gnome flavor. I changed their attack. So normally they have a hand crossbow, but I changed it to a poison dart with poison, because that's something that regular gnomes have, and it seems to me that it would be more likely that they would be using that. I changed their short sword to a dagger, because it seemed more likely that a gnome would be using a dagger. But apart from that, it's pretty much the exact same. It still has the cunning action, it still has the sneak attack, it still does all of the same things, same AC, same hit points. It just changed the weapons around, and these weapons are probably weaker than the weapons in the regular spy kit. And I do find that I usually change the weapons to be a little weaker, if anything. Cool, so that's the spy, and I've got him here with a couple of his regular deep gnome friends, which would be an example of a combat. You could put other things here if you wanted, but yeah, I didn't put too much effort into the actual creation there. Next, we have the Berserker, which is a really fun, it's just a barbarian, but it doesn't get the rage, so it takes normal damage. It's basically, it just has reckless attack, and a whole bunch of hit points and low AC. So what better thing to reflavor than a zombie? So I basically, the things that I changed with this, I gave it undead fortitude, which, if you don't know, basically if a zombie dies, so we'll just go to the regular zombie here, If a zombie dies, it must make a Constitution saving throw with a DC of 5 plus the damage taken, unless it's critical or radiant, and if it succeeds, it goes to 1 hit point instead. So this thing is tankier. The chances of it dying are less, and because of that, I removed the armor. I mean, berserkers don't necessarily have much armor, but it wouldn't make sense to me that a raging frenzied zombie would have armor. You could also, with this one, I haven't changed it. Normally it has a great axe. You could maybe change it so that it does a slam attack like normal zombies do. So it does less damage, but it is more tanky. You could definitely do all of those things, or you could just do it. The things that I'm changing with these are for my own flair, or narrative flair. You can, if you want, just use all of the stats for the berserker and just call it a berserker zombie. You don't have to change anything, but if you do change things, it gives you more options, and it does change the feel of the fight. If your berserker zombie dies and then the zombie next to it gets undead fortitude, it might not seem that plausible when the big raging bad guy just died and the little stumbling zombie didn't. So yeah, just keep in mind that you don't have to change anything. The creatures are balanced in themselves and they do cool abilities, and it's mostly for a little bit of flair that you would change anything at all. Speaking of narrative, you could just say, much like the people that they were in life, zombies come in all shapes and sizes, some very big sizes. So yeah, I've got a little encounter here with a couple of berserker zombies and regular zombies and a couple of skeletons. So yeah, that's my reflavor of the frenzied zombie. And lastly, we have the Bullywug Bombina. So the narrative flair for these guys are larger bullywugs are usually driven to leadership. Before they can challenge the tribe leader for rule, younger bombinas are sent out on raids with their smaller cousins. If they survive long enough, they usually grow bold enough to demand a challenge. The winner of such combat ends up being the new leader of the tribe. So these are just younger, super big bullywugs. Again, in the monster manual, bullywug, all you have is the one thing. You just have the regular bullywug warrior. So if you do want to have a varied combat with multiple bullywugs, you need to use the NPC section. Things that I have changed. It didn't make sense to me that he would have splint armor. Oh, sorry, I haven't even told you what I'm going this from the veteran. So veterans are like fighters. They have good armor, they have a long sword, they have a short sword, and they just deal out the damage. And yeah, they're just a veteran, literally what they are. So this guy, it didn't make sense to me that he would have splint armor. So I changed that. So he now has studded leather armor and a shield. So he has less armor, and he can no longer dual wield. But it sort of balances out because he gets a bite attack, because that's what bullywugs can do. They can bite and spear. So I swapped the spear for a... Normally they have a longsword, so I swapped that with a spear, just because it made more sense to me, because all other bullywugs use spears, so why would he be any different? I know in the picture here he has a hammer, but yeah, so I gave him a spear and a shield. He has a bite attack, which he can do every turn. Which is very similar to the veteran. The veteran can attack with a short sword as a bonus action. So it's keeping everything very similar. And instead of a crossbow, I gave him javelins. So he can throw javelins instead of using a crossbow, because it didn't make sense to me that the bullywug would have a crossbow. And then obviously all of the froggy stuff. He can breathe underwater, he can do his long jump, he can talk to frogs, things like that. So it's the exact... I think this one's the closest to the original veteran, even though I've changed a lot of things. The things that I've changed have sort of made it the same, just reskinned, which is what we're doing. And then here a little example, combat. You could have a giant toad with some bullywugs and your bombina. And for anyone who wants to know what Bombina is, it's a scientific name for some frog. I just googled that because I couldn't think of what a Bullywog badass veteran would be called. So, yeah. I hope this has been interesting, and I hope that you guys have learned something from it. It's limitless what you can do with this. You can do if you want an orc that heals. Well, I think there's already an orc in the monster manual that does that. But if you say you want an orc to be a mage, do it. Just take the stats for mage, put it on an orc, give them aggression, and you're done. Easy as that. There's no reason, just because they're stereotypical things that we view certain creatures as, doesn't mean there can be a random super smart wizard orc. There's no reason that isn't happened. Or you could have a giant goblin who's just he's the size of a man, and he's led his tribe to victory because he's this big badass berserker. You can do whatever you want, and definitely experiment with this sort of stuff and change things up and see what you can do with it, because it is a good tool to have when you are building encounters, to be able to do this sort of stuff. You realize pretty quickly it definitely improves combat. But yeah, enough of my ramblings. I will stop recording now.